All right, I want to close out and summarize what we talked about last week. I'm sorry I'm getting this on Tuesday. The trustees are on campus this week, so I've been in meetings and class, so I apologize for not getting this out yesterday. As we were, I don't want to really address too specifically the issue of Son of God, Son of Man in Ezekiel Daniel, because I think you guys did a great job of bringing that out. And of course, the discussion that we had that I added as far as the importance of or the principles of hermeneutics and biblical interpretation, especially as it deals with word studies and things like parallel terms. I think you guys did a good job of bringing those principles out as well. What I want to talk about here, just briefly, is it kind of linked to the issue of Daniel and Ezekiel, because Daniel and Ezekiel are two Old Testament books that are oftentimes used in eschatological discussions and when dealing with end times material. I think the lessons that we draw from the Son of God, I keep saying Son of God, Son of Man phrase that is something that is, I think, a good object lesson for how we should deal with a lot of these studies in dealing with the end times, because oftentimes you'll see a scholar or a writer, most times it tends to be writers, that find parallel terms, find parallel even maybe images, and reads into them the whole context from a previous chapter. Now, there could be some merit for this, but the study of the Son of Man in Ezekiel and Daniel has shown us that just because two writers use the same phrase or use the same term doesn't mean they mean the same thing. Our first priority and our first job in interpreting any text is to interpret the text in its context. And this is something I saw from several of you in the discussion, which I just love, which is context is the key issue here. So when we're dealing with eschatology and trying to understand these concepts and trying to understand how they relate to one another, we can't just take, for instance, Daniel and then the end of Daniel and lay it on top of Revelation and say these two link this way and start trying to find all these different doing all these hermeneutical gymnastics to try to get them to fit. We have to understand Daniel in its context and Revelation in its context. And then if we find good reason to believe that Revelation is drawing from Daniel or trying to link to Daniel, then we can examine carefully, still paying attention to the two contexts, try to see how they fit together into a larger theological picture. And of course, this moves on beyond just eschatology. This moves on with any of the biblical theologies. We move to systematic theology. We want to understand that the texts, we have to deal with the text in their context first, and then draw that out to come to some conclusions on theology. We can't start with a theological presupposition and lay it on the text and expect the text to be teaching that, because it might not be. When Jesus uses Son of Man and refers to himself as Son of Man, we just can't automatically assume that because Ezekiel says Son of Man, therefore that's what Jesus is talking about. We have to pay attention to the context. That's with anything that becomes the key.